Follow me as we dig through some CSS commands to transform a simple list in a dramatic way. Hey, welcome back. In this recording, we're going to do CSS to keep on modifying our to-do list. In previous recordings, we added dynamic action where you can click on the elements, the checkboxes to make them set or unset. You can click on the to-do item and even make a change. So I could say toothpaste minty and click apply changes. It will the report then will refresh, add our minty, and we can click on the trash and delete it and it will disappear, and of course we can do an add. So before we start, the first thing I want to say is I am no CSS expert. I'm an Apex developer, and I've been learning a lot of CSS as you go along because that's what makes your applications stand out, and you can then work on the way they look. So there may be things that maybe you're gonna try on your own and research a little bit more. But that said, what we're gonna do, I think will work really well for our to-do list. The first thing I want to address is this bullet point in our UL. That would be one of the first things I want to get rid of. But before we get started, I think we need to review our structure of our report. We have a UL, and I went ahead and added app to do to the template so that I can target all of the UL. In the previous recording, we simply just had a UL and no class. But now with the class, I can target this list and leave alone other lists on the page. The way we did this is I'm gonna go to my share components, and actually I'll do that by going into the to-do list. I go into the attributes, and in the template for the to-do list, if I go edit that template, we'll see that on the before rows entry, I simply went ahead and added class app to do. Any name will do. It just has to be a valid CSS class name, and there are some simple rules you need to follow. And if we run this, yep, of course, well, we were already running it. Let's inspect again. So that's the first thing that's going to come in handy, to target just my UL. The next thing is to look at the structure that we have here in place. We actually have three anchors. We have one for the trash. Let me make this a little bit bigger for you here. We have one for the trash. We have one for the actual to-do text. And I also have a class for that guy. And then I have an anchor for our checkbox. And that one, if you remember, we said class of CHK item so that we can target the checkbox. We have a class for the text to do element. We can now target that element. And we have a class for our trash can, which right now this class doesn't do anything about styling. It's simply used for the dynamic action. So I think before I get started, I want to group all three of them with a div. Now they're all inside an LI element, a list element, but putting them in a div may give us a little bit of a more direct way to group all these elements together. It's probably an optional step, but I want to go ahead and do that change. Let me zoom out. I should have stayed where I was. I'm actually gonna just click the back button. Yep, don't click back button too much in Apex, but this one's okay. I'm going back to my template. And my template has our delete, our to do, and our check item. I'm gonna wrap them all in a div with a class. And I just need to make up a class name, whatever I want. And the editor's doing this for me, but I'm gonna get rid of the extra line. Why don't we call it element? And well, it closed the div for me, but I'm gonna grab it and add it at the end. I'm going to apply my changes and run. This should not change the way things look. Everything should pretty much stay the same with the same styling. And there you go. It's all the same. If I inspect it, I now have a div that grabs the element. Now, one thing I love about Chrome is that right here I have this element style, and I could start making changes to this, and I can say height is 20 pixels, and well, and that's not applying. There we go. Oh, it was just too small. So now you can see how my height is being applied as I do my up and down arrows. They're being applied. Now we're gonna remove that instead of adding it to that element style, because that's gonna insert it just in line to that div element. I'm gonna click this plus, which is the new rule, and because we have a class of element, it's gonna assign it to that element. Now I actually want it to be app to do space dot element. So that means I'm targeting the UL that has an app to do, and then an element that is inside an app to do. That's what these two classes mean. And in there, I'm going to say that our height is, that changes all of them. See that? Now, instead of using pixels, we're gonna try a unit of measure called EM, and that was a whole lot. 30 EM is huge, but EMs are in relation to the font size. They're gonna be a little bit better for responsive design, if you will. I think that's still too much. I'm gonna do a 2.5. All right, we'll see how that works. We'll start with 2.5. Now, if I were to refresh my page right now, I will lose this CSS. This CSS here is only being injected into this one page. So I'm gonna go into Sublime. I'm gonna open a new tab and paste it. That way we're gonna start collecting all of the CSS we need, because right now it is not part of the page. If I were to refresh, this would be gone. Now, if I hover over the div, you can see how it's using the whole width of the screen. So I also want to make them a little bit shorter. Let's see. So we're going to use a width, and we're going to start with like a 5 EM. Let's see, and you see how they crunch up. I'm going to hover my mouse over the EM element, and you can see the blue, but my cursor is still on the 5 EM, so I can use my up arrow to simply change the size to what I think I'm gonna need. I think that's gonna give me enough space for the text and the checkbox, which I want to place at the very end of this this area. Yeah, probably 25 EM. Now that I think about it, I think I want these guys to be a little bit thicker, so I am gonna go all the way to 3. All right, so I'm gonna copy this CSS now so I don't lose it. Paste it there, right? Okay, next thing I want to address is that bullet point. Bullet points are part of the UL. They're standard in the UL. And if you look at the UL CSS specification or definition here, you see this list style type disk. Well, we're gonna, there's actually a lot of types. If we clear that, you can see how I can go through lots of different values here. So what we're going to do is just again create a new rule, and it's going to be the list style type, and we're going to call it none. I want to empty it. All right, I'm going to copy that, Save it. Now I want to save this. Might as well. We're gonna go into the www directory, CSS, and I'm gonna call it global.css. There. So it gets. It's still not part of my application. I'm just collecting all the CSS I want, and then we'll cover where we're gonna inject this. All right. So now we've gotten rid of that. Next thing I'm gonna do is I think I want all the colors of my anchors to be more of a black. Now I'm gonna tip you in on a little secret. You see this to-do list text here? It's actually not black. Pure black is a little bit jarring, especially in the universal theme. So if we were to inspect this color, you're gonna see this 343434 color, and that's a very dark gray. And if I were to switch it for black, which is just zeros, you're gonna see a different color here. So I'm gonna try to let's see, can I paste and undo? That's hard to see, but maybe in your browsers you'll get to see how each one, it's a little bit different. So we're gonna borrow that color and we're gonna apply it to all of our elements. To do that, one way to target them, they're all anchors, right? So I kind of need to change all of them. So I could write 3 CSS classes, one for the delete check, one for the to-do element, one for the check item. But instead of doing that, I'm going to use the name element, I'm going to use the app to do, and then I'm going to use the A. So what do I mean by that is I'm going to click plus, and we're actually going to do app to do dot element and A. That targets all the anchors that are under app to do under elements. Okay, there. So now they're all that dark gray that looks like it's a black color. I'm gonna copy that as well. Okay, it's looking better. Now, next thing I want to do is, remember our divs, our text is at the top of the div. So centering with CSS is always quite a challenge. But let's see. I think we can. Let's try something. Yeah. So that's not where I'm going to, but that margin means the 0 is for the top and the bottom, and the auto is just gonna split the available to center things. I actually want the opposite. I want auto and then 0. Yeah, but that's still not doing what I want. So scratch that. We'll try a different approach to center our guys. We're gonna go back to where we put the color, because they're all the anchors. I wonder if I can just add a little bit of margin. Now we're gonna make them all be position relative. Position relative doesn't do anything on its own, but what it did is it unhinged all the block elements so that we can start adding positional commands to all our anchors. So now that I set position relative to all the A's are free to move around. I'm gonna go into the to-do element. I'm gonna create a new rule, and I'm gonna say top 3px. You see how it moves? And I can now move it up and down. Now, I don't know where I'm moving it around yet within the size, so I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna add a border, a temporary border, 1 pixel, solid color, and it defaults to black. And it looks horrible. I'm not gonna leave that border. That's not what I want. I want to be able to center my elements within. I'm going to be changing the size of the of the checkboxes and the trash can. So before we start moving them around, I think I need to change their sizes. And if we go to Font Awesome, the way Font Awesome does this multiple sizes is it creates these classes. This FA3, FA2, and if I look at what FA2 and FA3 are, they're doing FA2, it's going to be a font size of 2M, twice the regular size of what's defined on the page. And if I go to the 3, it goes all the way to 4. I mean, these are arbitrary numbers. They're just saying FA3 is this size. So we're going to create our own because Apex doesn't come with those FA elements. They actually get applied to our Font Awesome element. So let's see, if I were to add FA-2, nothing happens because FA-2 doesn't exist yet. But if I create a new rule and I do .fa-2, I'm going to say this is a font size of 2em. You see that? Now, whatever has an FA-2 will be a bigger size. So let's see how that looks for our check item. And I'm gonna double click here, FA-2. Okay, so that's looking a lot better for what I want. So I'm gonna save this FA-2. I'm gonna put it at the top because this is kind of more global. Then we're gonna have to include that FA-2 on both of these elements. Okay, I think this is a perfect time to now include all this in our page. So I'm gonna first edit the page. I need to go into our delete, and this is where the class for the delete is included, and here's where the trash is. So I'm gonna add FA-2 here. So now our trash can will be twice as big, if you will. And our check item, and this one we actually placed as part of the query. So we're gonna do FA-2 as part of that. Save this. If we run it, nothing will happen. Actually, we're gonna lose all of the changes we've made because we have not applied our CSS to the page. So at the end, we're gonna be adding that CSS via the theme roller. We're gonna go to the custom field, custom CSS field that is down here. This is where I'm going to insert it because then it will get minimized and injected along with the application. But because I'm still developing, I'm going into the application, to the page attributes, and in my inline CSS, I'm going to grab all of this and paste it here. And if I run now, I'm going to see a bunch of my changes. Okay, they're all styling changes. It's still fully functional. Great. So we're getting closer to the effect that we're going for. Okay, now we can start moving things around. One thing I want to do is I want to move this checkboxes. I want to move them at the end of the div. If you see where the div ends, where the blue it's ending, I'm going to say that the position for the check item, I'm going to add another rule. I'm going to say check items, I'm going to be from the right, I'm going to start with a 0. Okay, and nothing happens, and this is one of the frustrations of positional things. I think what happened is I did not include my position relative in that guy. And actually I want it on the A's, all the A's. All right, position relative. We're going to float it to the right, and then we could do a right. See, now we can push it from the right. We can push it in or out depending on where we want it. So we'll adjust it a little bit later because let's see, well, we'll adjust it now because if it's 0, it's right at the edge. I want it a little bit inside. Okay, like that. And then from the top, I'm gonna push it down. And as I'm moving things around, I'm looking at that blue area. And there's the blue area. And I'm just making sure that it looks sort of centered within it. I'm gonna go with 7. All right, let's copy the CSS so that we don't lose it. And I'm adding to my global because I'll consider that my master. I wonder if I can get rid of this one. Nope, that's the one we need to keep. So we need to add this position relative to all the A elements so they can move around. I'm gonna put my border again. Well, I don't have to. If I just click on the element and then hover, I'll be able to see how I center it. So I want that trash can to actually move a little bit lower. Let's see. So I'm going to add a new rule. That's going to be another delete. From the top, I'm going to hover on the element so I get the blue there. And I'm going to type 1 pixel. There. Okay. I'm also realizing that I want to have a different effect for the trash can. I don't want the trash cans to be that prominent. So I'm probably going to get rid of the FA2 on the trash cans. I'm going to get rid of the FA2s on the trash cans. I'm going to then center them. Let me click on the top. And I'm going to put a left to push them in. Okay. And I also want them to be a different color. I kind of want them to be a gray. So 44. Yeah, and see this guy has a bigger precedence than this guy's. So if I add another class, the app to do, which I should have done from the beginning, I'm probably okay there. You see how they switched to gray now? There's something called CSS precedence that defines what CSS class is going to be available or is going to apply. And that's useful to know how preferences work because they're the source of a lot of frustration. I'm going to copy this before I lose it. And that was my delete item. Great. You see how this check item doesn't have the to do? It also should have the to do in it. Okay, so it's going to be gray and smaller. And then when I hover over it, I would like it to go bigger and change colors. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to add a hover pseudo element to my definition. This definition. So let's do it over here. When you hover, you get this pseudo element. Let me move the screen up. There's this hover pseudo element. So what I'm saying is whenever I hover over a check item, I don't want a check item, I'm sorry. I want to delete check, which is my trash can, right? Whenever I hover over it, I want my color to be some sort of red. I'm going to start simply by putting red right now. We're not going to leave it like that. That's probably going to be very jarring. And I could also change the size here. Actually, not quite there because the size is on the font awesome element. So it would be more like this, the FA trash, right? Is that what we're defining on our, yeah, FA trash? We would apply some size here. But instead of just doing a size, where I'm gonna be switching this later to a different technique. Remember we had a 2EM? I'm gonna start with that, and I'm gonna show you why we're not gonna do it that way. So let's copy this into the page so we can see how far or close we are. I'm gonna select it all, paste it, save it, run it. Okay, so the size is not changing, but you see the red now. The hover, our red works. The size, we're still on the same size as before because we have the class FA2 as part of the trash. So I'm going to remove that. Make them smaller again. Okay, there. And that's horrible, right? When you hover, everything to the right is moving, right? Well, there's going to be a better technique to that. But before we do that, let's now move our actual text. So our to-do elements from the top, we're going to start with a little bit like 5. Let's move it further down. I'm going to hover over the div so I can see better where I want it. Okay, 12. And then from the left, I'm going to make it 20. That's too much. 13. 12 and 12. I like that. 12 and 12. But if I hover, that still moves. So bear with me. We're going to make a change to that. But let's copy this CSS before we lose it. We're going to do app to do. Our element will have those settings. Great. Paste them into the application. Going to our settings, our page settings, going to the inline and paste. Save it. All right, wonderful. The universal theme uses this. If I go to apex.oracle.com/ut, that takes me to the universal theme sample application. I'm gonna click on browse components, click on lists. We're gonna borrow some elements from here. You see how these guys move and they get a shadow? I like that. I kind of want to put that in place in our list. So I'm going to inspect this. And here's how that's done. This div first is going to have this transition. This transition attribute says all transitions are going to take 0.1 of a second, and they're going to do an ease out in the type of movement. That means it's not a linear change in the movement. It's going to start fast and slow down. That's what ease out means. So we're going to borrow this transition I'm going to paste it somewhere in here. We're also going to, well, it moves when we hover, right? So we're gonna enable the hover so we can see our class. And you see this toggle element state? These things are super useful in your developer tools. You hit it, and now I can fake a hover. You see that when I click on that, how the element's moving up and down? Not only that, I have the CSS that is showing up, and it's translating the Y, it's moving it 6 pixels. It's doing a translate, and it's adding a box shadow. So I'm just gonna borrow this completely. And where does this go? Well, I think this is gonna go in our app to do element, our whole element. I'm gonna copy all this up. Our whole element will have, I'm gonna close this there, we'll have an ease out on the movements. But then if we hover over the element, we're going to do this transform setting. I'm gonna save this. Let's see how well this works. Our inline, select all, paste it. I'm getting nervous that you can't see it, but there it is. Click OK, save changes, run. You see that? Now, for my liking, for these elements, that's a lot of movement. That's okay. We're gonna prototype it here by going into the toggle state elements, click on the hover. Now I can see the class, and instead of 6, I'm gonna make it maybe a 2. There you go. I think that's a lot better. And the shadow, because we're making it less, I think that shadow, that first value is on the horizontal and the 10 is on the vertical. I want a little bit less of a shadow. Maybe that's okay. Just perfect. So we went to an 8 and oops. And we went to a -2 in the translate. We're gonna have to change all of these. See, what happens is this is going to be used, this is a prefix, a browser specific prefix. This transform is going to be used when you're using a WebKit type browser like Safari. If you're in a Microsoft one, it's going to use this one. All others that support it will use this one. So we actually have to change all of them. I think we went to a 2, correct? And our shadow went to a 4. Yeah, I moved it by mistake. There, 10. What it was 10. How's an 8? Yeah, 8 is better. Let's stick with that. 8. Save it. Great. So we're getting there. Now, I think, let's get back to that delete checkbox. We're changing the size with this. I think we can do some sort of transform where we change the size. I think we can do size. I could be doing this wrong. 2M instead of font size. Let's save this. Let's see how that looks. Select all, paste it, save, run. Let's do a quick search. CSS transition size, look at that. I had searched for that before. And this CSS tricks, I love that website for learning CSS. I think that's a great resource. And oh, there you go. So it's scale, what I was looking for. So I'm going to transform the scale by 1.1 or whatever point I want. So let's prototype it. Transition scale 1.1. There's something taking precedence over that. Oh, it's a transform. Yeah, transition is how do they move. Transform is what we actually want to do. Okay. Let's go with scale by 2. Nope. Yeah, we're not scaling the anchor. We actually need to scale the I element, and yeah, there's where it is. We want to do a transform scale 1.1. There it is. You saw it move. 1.5. Maybe that's better. Hover. And you see the difference now. When we were changing the size, it was pushing things around. And this transform will just change the size, but it doesn't really push things around. I love that. All right. So that's a lot better. Now, let's copy this. To our delete for the FA trash icon. The other thing we're going to address right now is the color. We're not going to do just red. Okay, it's a little bit jarring. So we could click on this guy and use the color picker. I can shift click on the checkbox and it's going to go between HSL, the name, hex, and RGB. HSL is great for prototyping. I have a little blog post on this. Hue, saturation, and lightness. So how saturated is that color? Well, I don't want it as saturated. I'm gonna lower this, and as I'm lowering it, that red is changing a little. And then the lightness. See, if I just go up, it's getting brighter, more white out, so it's disappearing. So I'm just gonna move this until I see a color that I sort of like where it stands. Okay, I think the 60%. Now, I found a color that I like. I don't want it to be, or I'm not gonna use the HSL value. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna shift click on that and rotate it back to a hex. There it is. So that hex is the equivalent to what we just found. So instead of red, I'm gonna use this color. All right, let's place that in here. I copy, paste, save, and run. There you go. And if I hover, and they're still all fully functional. If I delete the element, it goes away, and we still have all of our transitions. If I click on these guys, they still fully functional. Perhaps the only final thing I'm going to do here is I would like a line separator between the elements. So I'm going to add a border bottom. A border at the bottom is going to be a 1 pixel solid, but again, that's very, very strong color. So I'm going to go with something that's almost white. Let's go with, there it is. That's a little bit better. That's it. We're gonna keep that. In our elements, border bottom, I'm gonna copy this. And guess what? We're gonna do one more thing. Instead of placing now on the page, I'm gonna remove that. So if I open this, this is all the CSS is gone, right? If I save this and run it, our application is back to before we started. We've only played with the styling. Let's save it as part of the theme roller. I'm gonna open theme roller. I'm gonna paste it on that custom CSS. We have a lot of empty lines here, but there's all of it, and it's already being applied. And I need to save it as, because this is one of the built-in templates or styles, sorry, with theme roller. So I'm gonna save it, and I'm gonna do app to do Vita slate, save it. On future changes, well, one more thing, I need to set it as current. There, set as current. Future changes, I need to make sure I'm changing this CSS. Now, I personally will keep maintaining this global CSS file to not lose track of this in case somebody removes that style or does that style part of the theme roller. Now, if I close it, it'll go away for a moment. It's refreshing. It's going to apply. There it is. That's all I have for today. Next screencast, we're going to add drag and drop. That's why I wanted these guys to kind of pop up, because we're going to allow the grabbing them and moving them around. Thanks for watching. Take care.